Chair Bauer, we are now live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the May 9th meeting of the General Government Committee. I will be your chair this afternoon. This meeting of the General Government Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members and staff in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. I will now call this meeting to order. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest from Council? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move to item 3 on the agenda, which is the adoption of the minutes. May I have a mover for the regular meeting of April 11th? I see Councillor Khan. All in favor, or any questions first? None. All in favor? Thank you, that carries. And the minutes for the closed session meeting of April 11th, may I please have a mover for those? I see Regional Councillor Lee. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Wonderful, thank you. For the consent agenda today, there were 2 items pulled, 4.1 and 4.5. So may I please have a mover for the remaining items of the consent agenda? I see Councillor Tyler Morin. All in favor? Thank you, that carries. So we'll move to item 4.1, the COVID-19 Pandemic Delegation Authority Bylaw Summary Report, and that was pulled by Regional Councillor Lee. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. And this is just a question to the CAO. So, I think we're finally on the other side of COVID. For the most part, we're learning to live with it. And so these past 2 years was, obviously not what council expected or probably not what staff expected or wanted either. But I think we did a very good job adapting to it. So I was just wondering, looking back now, my first question was, can you explain for anyone who's watching or didn't understand, why did we need delegated authority? Why was that power utilized within municipalities across Durham or even the province?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question, Regional Councillor Lee. As we spoke to Council about the requirement for delegated authority early on in the pandemic in March 2020, we needed an expedient decision-making process because, as you remember, things were coming at us left, right, and center. The province was daily changing the requirements and restrictions on every municipality, whether it be people not allowed in fitness centers or aquatic or in community centers as a whole. And so it was a process that was set up so that as the director, the CAO, but also the director of the Municipal Emergency Control Group, I could seek input from my senior team as well as communications and human resources and so on, and make decisions based on the information of the day. And what it did was it allowed us to make decisions solely, as you can see in the attached bylaw, solely related to COVID and service level decisions, et cetera, in an expedient manner without having to go back to council every time a level of service had to be changed. As you're aware, I have authority over the administration of the municipality, but if there's going to be a reduction or an increase in levels of service, council, there needs to be a recommendation to council, and council needs to approve that. And if you look at the CAO Delegated Authority decision tracker, which was forwarded to council on a weekly basis, you can see that throughout the course of the pandemic, there were 212 decisions that were made by the CAO under that delegated authority. But out of that 212, 160 of those decisions had to occur based on what was happening and the restrictions from the province and so on. Those 160 decisions happened in the first 9 months in 2020. And the remaining 52 happened in the year and a half afterwards. So it was a real crazy time. And I have to say, I really appreciate the support that I received from the MECG as well as council. We had communications updating. They were monitoring social media. We were putting out information on to the public as well as to staff. We did staff surveys to make sure that they were comfortable in with the protective equipment that they had and so on. So all of this information kept coming back to the MECG, and we were learning as we went. And I think everybody did a great job.
Thank you. And I completely agree. I absolutely do think staff, was nimble and able to react to, constant changes from the province. Were there any kind of takeaways we could factor in? So I'd like to think this will never happen again in our lifetimes, but I'm also, whether it's an environmental emergency or another pandemic, it is very possible that we may experience this again. So are there any kind of processes that you feel could be improved for the next time? Anything that you wish you could tell yourself, 2 years ago?
Well, I think it would be a really good idea for us to, debrief as a senior management team in the near future as to what we did and what was successful and what we should have done earlier. As far as I'm concerned, like if we have an emergency that happens over a weekend, for instance, even that weather event that we had recently, and we did a debrief and so on. Yeah, there's lessons to be learned. But in this particular case, because it was such a prolonged process, it was a continuous learning and a continuous improvement process for all of us. So as I had reported to council previously, I was meeting with the Durham Region CAOs on a weekly basis. So we were all reporting what we were doing, what we were experiencing in each municipality. It was interesting because in some areas they were experiencing pressures from their community in areas that we weren't, and vice versa, from their councils that we weren't, and vice versa. So it was a great forum for us to kind of see or pivot in case those types of issues came down the line to us. But I think in doing a debrief like that, I actually think maybe the delegated authority maybe could have come a little sooner. Like we were kind of under the gun to make decisions, and in consultation with the director of LIS, Legislative and Information Services. We talked about, okay, this now we're pushing the envelope on what the CAO authority is here. How do we move forward? And there was a lot of benchmarking and so on. And so we followed suit with what other municipalities were doing. But if we had been more on our toes, we could have done that delegated authority a little bit earlier, maybe a week earlier. But also, we learned that the communication that we had with our staff was very, very important, and understanding what their concerns were, whether or not they felt comfortable working from home. That was another thing. I think we learned, the whole world learned that it makes sense to have people work from home if there are issues in the workplace. I think we probably would have moved quicker to do that, and we will in the future, because now that's going to be part of our reality moving forward. But I think that because we had the time to learn, and we benchmarked, we were listening to the community and listening to our staff, and I was having updates with members of council as well. The first 9 months was a little crazy, a little hair-raising, but we seem to really show our resilience as an organization, council staff, and the community actually, and kind of got into a groove and realized that this was going to be our reality for a while, and I think we did very well.
Great. And I think the most important thing is the debrief so that we do have a playbook. Again, I don't foresee this happening. I hope it doesn't happen, but we definitely want to apply what we've learned. So thank you again to you and the staff for, getting us through this. Thank you again for the responses, and thank you, Chair, for the questions.
Great, thank you. Next on the speaker list is Councillor Tyler Moran. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. And through you to CAO Baker, thanks to you and your team for all kinds of scenarios that you had to encounter over those 2 years and keeping the ship afloat and straight. Greatly appreciated. Within the report, there it says that the town received approximately $5.2 million in provincial funding, and which helped offset the cost. I know. Can you speak for those that are listening about the unused grant balance of $1.7 million that's in the town reserves? Are we able to hold on to that? Are we able to invest that? Are we able to do some different things with it? Again, as per the report. Thank you, sir.
It's my understanding that we are able to hold on to it for the time being, and because as far as I'm concerned, we're still not 100% through. And as anybody who's ever gone through a declared emergency, the actual recovery phase is just as important as the mitigation phase, and we're definitely in the recovery phase now, and there may be expenses that are related to that. But what I'll do is I'll ask the Director of Finance and Treasurer, Diane Valentin, if she will speak to what could be done with that remaining balance.
Yeah, that could be part of a debrief. If I don't expect an answer now, I'm just bringing it up, and unless she has.
Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moran. So we have identified over $500,000 of that reserve balance for projects in 2022 that was put through our budget. Those for projects identified to get us through like what we learned through the pandemic. So these are projects that had been identified. So that funding is already allocated. So which leaves, about a balance of over about $1 million, but we are in the process right now. We're still undertaking many expenses as far as cleaning and security. We've already identified over $400,000 that's been spent in 2022 that funding will be utilized for.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford, you're next. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say a huge thank you to CAO Baker and all staff that got us through those 2 years. I don't think any of us have lived through a state of emergency that I can. My probably one of the oldest ones here, but I don't think I've ever gone through a state of emergency. And so I think the really hard thing as a person in our job is 2019, I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and all of a sudden, March 2020 is like, boom, done, nothing. And I was like going out of my mind, as you can well imagine. But it was a very good learning. I think it was a really good learning experience for everybody. I mean, we all pivoted to online community meetings, and for the most part, our community meeting attendance went up. And for most of our community preferred the online to going in person and said that we hope that we keep it. I think we've seen increased attendance at our local council meetings for sure, a much more engaged community because they're at home and they're not, whether they're working at home or just at home, they were more engaged online. And I know our open houses, all of our public information sessions, I can honestly say they seem to be far better attended online than they were ever in person. So I think we had some really big wins in the process of not understanding or knowing what we were doing. I think there's a few things that we could look at and say, that was really good. People really liked that. And And I think that you really have to look at that and say, I say, well done for pivoting, well done for making those areas still happen during a pandemic. Well done for making people feel secure online. And our seniors, Seniors Without Walls, being able to connect with them and keep them engaged as much as possible. I think there's so many things that we did that was really, really good. And we would never have been able to do that had we not had a state of emergency, had we not had a pandemic. So for all the hell that pandemic we all went through with that, and many, many people went through some very horrible situations through that, I honestly think that there were some wins that we really do have to recognize. And so for my point of view, I want to say thank you for constantly readjusting. I refuse to say pivot because I'm so tired of it, but constantly readjusting, right from our library to our seniors to all those things that I mentioned. And, allowing us to be a little bit crazy because it was so out of our, as persons, that's what we are. We are people. And so we wanted to be engaged, yet we couldn't be. And then, so I want to thank you for your patience. Well, with me, I can't speak from anyone else, but I want to thank you for your patience with me because I know I get a little bit crazy. So I appreciate everything you've done. And I did have a question. Honestly, I did have a question. The question was, does the MECG group still work? Is it still working? Who's on it and what is it doing? That would be my question. Sorry.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question, Regional Councillor Crawford, and thank you for your words of appreciation. I'm sure that MECG appreciates it. So yes, we were during the pandemic when things were changing constantly. We were meeting twice a week and communicating throughout the week based on what was happening. Now we're meeting once a week. Sometimes, if there's no, like we have it in our calendars for Thursday morning. Sometimes they're only, 20 minutes and we just do a check-in to see if there's anything new, if there's anything happening, what are we hearing on social media, or what are other municipalities doing? Are we hearing, that the province is preparing to, lift more restrictions or are more coming back, that type of thing. So that's what we're doing. We're just trying to keep on top of it until we feel it's totally gone. On the committee, we have the senior management team. We have the manager of economic development. We have the supervisor of corporate communications. We have the manager of human resources, the manager of public and strategic affairs. We have Cass on there, the coordinator of strategic initiatives. I'm trying to think of everybody who we think plays a role and would be of benefit as far as input into our discussion. Also, I almost forgot, sorry, the library CEO, Sarah Vassler, who has been great through the whole thing. And it's really interesting to have conversations about what's happening at the library and how they're managing over at the library versus what we're doing here. And we've really partnered well through this whole process. And Christy, I know Christy's on the line. If I've forgotten anybody, please pipe up and and mention them. But that's what we're doing right now. So hopefully it won't be too much longer. But frankly, we're all happy to have the time blocked in our calendar but it's a short meeting. We get other work done.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Regional Councillor Dyes. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for speaking to this, Mr. Baker. I agree with you that we're not out of this yet. And you're talking about debriefing and sort of, looking at how we come out of this, I think is going to be really, really important. I don't think we're going to know until at least the end of the year. So these were unprecedented times, and we've come out of this and everything's sort of topsy-turvy. Housing rates went up, interest rates went up, cost of everything has gone up, the supply chain has been interrupted. So I'm anticipating it's going to be interesting, I should say, how this all pans out at the end of the day and how long it takes to get back to a sense of normalcy. I don't think it'll go back to what it was previously. And I guess as you're going through, maybe to the end of this year and looking at this, I think it'd be interesting also to track how our public events come through this. From what I'm seeing so far, the public events I have been to, particularly cultural events, I'm seeing a huge response. So we're getting more people than we normally would. And I'm anticipating that any of our events at the town, there will be a lot of special events for families in particular. There'll be a lot of response. So our costs are going to go up as well to be able to provide these events. So I think that that's an important part of tracking this COVID situation as well. And hopefully with that little bit of balance that, we've got in our bank account, that will cover some of those expenses. So is that something you'll look at?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, the Regional Councillor Dies. We special events and meeting rooms and all that, all those things are definitely, we're hearing from recreation that they're definitely in very, very high demand. And they actually, people were reaching out to us a good month ago, as soon as they heard the restrictions were going to be lifted. So as far as sports groups and so on as well. So yes, that's one of the topics that we talk about how we are managing through all of that. And we are absolutely willing to use whatever COVID funds we need to make sure that we are properly resourced so that we can provide those special events to our community. And I agree with you. I think this summer you're going to see a real resurgence of people wanting to get outside and connect and be together and so on. And I'm hoping that the weather's good so that everybody has a fantastic summer, because I think we all deserve it. But yes, that's something that we're monitoring.
Well, that's good, because it was a full house at the St. Francis Centre Saturday night, which was great to see, and everybody was really excited to be there. I think that'll continue. And just to thank you also to staff who have come back and are picking up the pieces from COVID. And yes, the library did a phenomenal job through COVID as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of council? Okay, I just have one question. First, I do repeat, or I agree with what everyone has said. Thank you. It was a remarkable job, a remarkable time. And just having a chance to review that report and see things that happened in March 2020 and reading it thinking, oh my gosh, like it seemed like it was ages ago, and how many things have happened from then to now. Definitely to have it all recorded so we can see it, remember it, review it, learn from it. So thank you for all that hard work to you, CAO Baker and staff. Incredible job. Especially as a new first-time counselor, not really knowing the first term sort of kind of cut in half. With this, it was definitely some much needed and appreciated leadership from the town. So thank you. And my question was about the excess funds, or the unused, I guess, the funds that have not been earmarked. That there's no like use it or lose it or expiry date or time frame for using these funds up, is there? Thank you, Director Bauer.
Thank you. To answer your question, Chair Bauer, so we've been told that, so last year in 2020, we received funding, and that was just able to flow through our financial statements. When we received the funding in 2021, they had stipulated, or the province had stipulated, that any unused funds needed to go into a reserve to be utilized. They're a little bit unclear as to the utilization of that. So we are trying to utilize it. Just there could be an occasion where the province, ask for it to be returned. So we want to be able to use that where we can. And that's why we've earmarked some of it in our operating budget for 2022. And we are continuing to use it to help offset some of the COVID related costs right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Okay, there are no other questions, I believe. The mayor, sorry, Councillor Khan, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Please go ahead.
Talking about the excess funding or the surplus, I know there's always an ask in IT for upgrades, and part of this funds it was allocated for that department. Madam Valentim, is there any way that to be, rather than that coming out of our actual budget moving forward, if that funds can be implemented towards that? Because there's always an ask in that area, and we always need to be upgrading in that department. Is there a possibility that we can use that money into that department?
Through the chair to Councillor Khan, we have used some of that funding. There has to be a direct relationship with COVID. So when we switched to remote work, we did not have laptops to enable staff to work from home. So I believe that the vast majority of laptops that were purchased to allow remote work were funded through the COVID funding. So we are looking to opportunities as to how things have impacted our work environment through COVID and moving it forward that way. So we have identified some areas within IT that we are earmarking that funding for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. The mayor is on the call. He has requested to move the report. So moved by Mayor Collier. All in favor? Okay, none opposed. Thank you. That report carries. Regional Councillor Lee also pulled item number 4.5, which is the 2021 operating results and year-end reserve allocations. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. I just want to know, since the creation of the grant writer role, to date, how much money have we received from a grant writer, as from the position? There's a line item there just mentioned that we did get some grant money, and I think the role is 3 years old now. I could be between 2 and 3 years old. I just want to know just how much has that role generated for the town?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, I can provide an answer to that. So over the course, since 2019, when the role was filled, this role has generated, in partnership with all of the departments that have supported the submission of grant applications and finance for the reporting requirements. We have been approved for approximately $13 million in grant funding, including the COVID Safe Restart funding. And that is out of an approximate 40 million grant requests that have, or about 38 million that have been submitted since 2019.
And then is the basis of success for this role almost like, can you guarantee us this average every year? Like, is there an average you can generally estimate, or how do we, like, I think it's successful right off the bat. That's free money we didn't have as a town before. But I'm just wondering, from your point of view, do you do it based on the amount you've generated or based of successful grants? What is generally your definition of success for this role?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, CAO Baker may have some insights into what the overall success of this role looks like. But generally speaking, we know, or I know that we're never going to have 100% rate, and grants are very competitive. I would say that that's sitting around 30%. I'd like to see it higher. I'd like, as a personal ambition goal, to kind of land somewhere around 50% would be a good target, I think. But there's so many factors that go into, who gets grants and why, that it is tough to say. I would say that as a municipality, sometimes because the province or the feds view us as having funding sources and ways that we can find funds, they will sometimes prioritize community organizations or not-for-profits that don't have dedicated streams of revenue that municipalities do. Whether we have many of them or few of them is debatable, I think. But for the most part, the fact we are a municipality impacts, I think, our success rates, as well as, we have, there's other extenuating factors like when we've received COVID funding and things like that. So, I think the success rate of what we've done so far of about 35% is good. And I would say that as a personal goal, I'd like to increase that to 50. But in terms of, goal relative to the corporate goals, I might let CAO Baker speak to that a little bit further if he'd like to.
Through you, Madam Chair, I did see Director of Finance's hand up and see Christie's hand up. But yes, my viewpoint is that the role of a grants coordinator or somebody in the organization who is focused on first monitoring what grants are available and then being a liaison for different departments to ensure that we get our applications done. It has contacts with the province or the federal government to be able to move those grants forward expediently and so on, and answer questions. Normally, these grants in a lot of municipalities are something that's done on the corner of somebody's desk, and a lot of focus isn't given to them. But this is money that is available, and there are many grants available to municipalities. So for me, as far as what's a measure of success? Well, I always look at a cost benefit, and so if the grants coordinator is making more money or is bringing in more money than it costs us for her, it's all good. So, and it's good peace of mind for me to know that we're not going to miss one here or there, that CAS is on top of it. And whether, I totally agree. If we don't, it's not expected that we're going to get them all, but we're going to try for them all.
Perfect. That absolutely answers my question. And I'm assuming CAS does not make 12.9 million. So I think she's definitely making more than she's bringing in than she's making. So thank you, both of you, for your responses. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I didn't see the hand function. Thank you for pointing that out, CEO Baker. So I think what I'll do is I'll ask Director Valentin if she has any comments. Then we'll move to Christy McClarty, and then we'll move to Regional Councillor Crawford. So go ahead, Director Valentin.
Thanks. I think actually Christy wanted to go first, so I'll defer and let her go first.
Fair enough. Go ahead, Christy.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to elaborate a bit. We talk about the position solely from a grants function, but I think it's very important to stress that there's other elements to this position that are incredibly important and significant to this organization. So part of it is the development of our partnerships and working with, we talked about we might not have the capacity of the funding to be able to execute a priority, but we're looking to those partnerships with whether it's our community groups or for-profit organizations, and taking advantage of that. Also, from a non-tax revenue perspective, we really haven't been able to get into that because of COVID and where we're at. So we focused on the grants piece, but there's a lot of work that we want to do around naming rights and looking at that and sponsorship opportunities. So we need to still explore those pieces to this job. And also, we are coming back to council with the corporate giving program as well in June, which is very, very important, and will add to this work. So it's a combination of things that make it a very successful program. And one being, as an example, is the Computech example, right? Like where we were able to be an agent for Computech in order to be able for them to be successful in that funding. So we're going to continue to look for all of those types of opportunities. Thank you for that opportunity.
Great, thank you. Director Valentin?
Thank you. So I'll just add on to what CEO Baker was speaking about. As far as grants, sometimes they're issued by the province and we're not aware of them. By having somebody monitoring what grants come available is very valuable to the organization. As CEO Baker had mentioned, often it would sit on the side of someone's desk. And if they're not aware of these grant opportunities, they may not meet the deadline. There's also a significant amount of paperwork involved for the application process. So Ms. Cristiano has been instrumental in assuming that role to fill out the application, and she knows how to do that. That is valuable as well, because somebody who is maybe doing a grant application for the first time, they may not fill in all of the appropriate schedules, and that could be an opportunity then that's missed. So it is is a valuable position to the organization. And as Ms. Cruciano had said, we're not expecting to get 100% of the grants that we apply for. That would be ideal, but we are getting a lot more grants than had we not had someone in that role searching for these grants.
Excellent, thank you. Regional Councillor Crawford, then Regional Councillor Dyes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that this was something that we campaigned on. This was one of the things that we talked about in campaigning about getting non-taxable revenue coming into the town. Was one of the things that CAO Baker he planned when he talked about in his interviews when he was coming into the town, was that we, although we do we have applied for grants in the past, and so it's not like this is a new thing, but having eyes on stuff all the time is super important, and we were losing out on some of the opportunities. My understanding too is that CAS was very instrumental with some of the nonprofit groups through COVID, being able to help them apply, again, like Computech. Well, Computech was not a nonprofit, but some of the groups that were looking for grants for whatever reason, she was able to help them walk through that process through COVID. And I think that that's a great a great opportunity of helping out our nonprofits through a very difficult time. I just wanted to ask, I know we had a report just recently on our grants, because I remember asking this question. Some of the projects that we have been able to fund through the grant process, were they, I guess maybe just for anybody who might be listening, were they new projects, or were they already on the books and we were able to get money to save having to spend the money? Just wondering, would that, you don't even have to tell me every single one of them, just maybe a percentage, were 50% new projects, or were and 50% were already on the books? Or do you understand what my question is? Somebody nod.
I think through you, Madam Chair, to Regional Councillor Crawford. So CAS might be able to give you more of a percentage, but generally speaking, I don't want to use the word pivot, but generally speaking, we will maneuver based on the grant. Like sometimes a grant will come in and it will be something that may not be on, in the next few years in the capital forecast, but it's something that we know needs to be done, or something that sounds like a great idea. And so then we will bring it forward to council and say, look, this grant is available. This is how much the province or the federal government is offering. This is how much council would have to contribute. Is it something that council wants us to pursue? So I think it's the one thing that I'm very happy with my senior management team about is that we have become extremely flexible, extremely nimble, and we don't discard an opportunity just because it's not on the capital forecast. If it's something that's good for the community and would be a good investment, and we can get money from other levels of government to contribute, then we're going to bring it forward.
Well, free is always good. Always good.
Director Valentin or Ms. Cruciano, did you have any additional comments to that?
Through the chair, it's Cass to Regional Councillor Crawford, just to build on what CAO Baker was saying. At exactly what he said, I would say the kind of first place when we find a grant is I usually take a look at the capital budget, and that's kind of my first place if it's a capital grant. And I look at things that we know are high budget, that we know are in the forecast, and maybe are a little bit we're worried about where we're going to find that funding for them. And then in conversation with the Director of Finance and other staff in finance and with senior management, we kind of pivot. And I know that's a word that we said we weren't going to say, but we do that. So if there are things in the capital forecast that we can accelerate or that we can fund, we're going to do that where that makes sense. But to CAO Baker's point, we don't say no to a grant just because it's not in the capital forecast. And so when we find those exciting opportunities that are strategic plan items, or they are in one of the other, economic development action plan, the IT plan, all of these kind of big picture frameworks and guides that we, as a corporation want to follow, if we can fulfill things in those plans by applying for grant funding or by forming partnerships, we're always going to look at that. And so that's kind of the overall direction of where of how we fund or look at applying for grants or partnerships that way.
Great. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Regional Councillor Dyes, you are next. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And my question's kind of been answered. It's already been spoken to with respect to partnerships and helping community groups in Ajax access these grants, which I think is really critical, particularly in areas that the municipality, it is their area of responsibilities. The municipality can't go for them. Because these community groups really do improve the quality of life for our neighbors. So thank you for that. I think it's really important, and I'm glad you've been able to help out in that area. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions for 4.5? Okay, seeing none, may I please have a mover for that staff report? I see Regional Councillor Lee. All in favor? Thank you, that carries. So that is the end of topic number 4. Item 4. Number 5 is the discussion. There's no discussion today. So we will move to the presentations. 6.1, the first one is Town of Ajax Geographic Information System Strategic Plan. We have Director Cooper and Mr. Walker. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair Bauer. I'm just going to make a few opening remarks. As you'll see, we are joined here today by our consultants from GTG and by Chris, who I won't introduce in detail because I suspect they'll do so themselves as they get into their presentation. But I just wanted to say a couple words about this project before we dive in. So you folks have heard me over the years dropping these little teasers from time to time about how the GIS area is one to watch, and it's like this tiny little powerhouse team in IT that's just busting with talent and energy. That's eventually going to shape and influence just about everything we do municipally. So this is kind of where all of that begins. And I think the tone of what you'll hear today in relation to the state of the current state of the town's GIS and the go forward strategy, I think you'll find that it's noticeably different than some of the other conversations we've had around master plans and strategies over the course of this term. There's really no bad news story here. You won't hear about years of underinvestment and we're so far behind and we're at risk. That's not what you'll hear today. What you'll hear today is that we have this healthy GIS foundation and that there's a lot of really cool things to come, cool places we can go in this area with the appropriate investment. And so I just wanted to take a second to sort of place today's presentation and the GIS strategy within the broader context of our technology roadmap and our 5-year IT strategic plan. Because as you know very well, the first couple of years of that plan were all about network infrastructure and cybersecurity and reorganizing and growing the team and policies and standards and governance and sort of all that inward facing stuff. And now that we've gotten all of that in order and laid this really strong foundation, we're able to turn our energy and our efforts towards this really cool stuff, like the customer facing stuff, the smart city stuff. And so I hope as we bring these types of things forward to you, you're seeing, as I'm seeing, a real maturing of our technology posture as an organization. And of course, that's thanks in very large part to Chris Walker and his exceptional leadership of his group and of their projects. And some of you might not know that Chris's background and his beginnings were actually in GIS. And so I know this strategy is very near and dear to his heart. So with that, I will just stop talking and pass things over to Chris and to our friends at GTG. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for being here with us today. If you don't mind going back to the previous slide, whoever is controlling that. So I just wanted to quickly introduce Kurt Hinton, who is the president of Geographic Technologies Group, otherwise known as GTG, and then James Kelt, who's the vice president of corporate software, who will be showing you some of the neat stuff that we have the potential of implementing here in in Ajax. So the GTG, they've been an exceptional partner throughout all this, and I just wanted to call that out. So the project purpose here, as Ms. Cooper mentioned, I started in GIS about 14, 15 years ago with Ajax, so it really is near and dear to my heart. So with that, I really wanted to align our GIS technology with our corporate goals and objectives, and I think you'll see how that can happen today. We want to ensure that the GIS program is optimized corporately. We want to ensure that it's aligned with the overall principles and outcomes of the technology strategic plan that Council knows so well. We want to optimize our GIS assets and applications. We want to optimize our options of staff resourcing. We want to make sure we are supporting things like open data and our community access to information. And we want to align GIS as a primary data and information platform. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kurt and James, and they'll take it away from us from here.
Thanks a lot, Chris and Nicole. I appreciate the introduction. And first, let me say that it's been a great project. We've been with the team for about 9 months, and you guys have a fantastic group of staff that are very enjoyable to work with. I'm a former GIS manager myself in local government, so I can appreciate some of the challenges and things that you guys face every day. But what we're looking at is a 5-year strategic plan for GIS. And in GIS, I think most of you know what it is, but it's mainly a way to visualize the world we live in, computerized mapping of everything. So what I like to say was I do some of my writing is that 95% of everything we do in local government ties back to geography. So think about that, an address or an asset or a piece of property. And that's why GIS is such a powerful tool. So in this project, we looked at where are we today? Where are we going? And we kind of broke it up into 3 phases and 8 steps. And as you can appreciate, the document is probably close to 300 pages, and we've got about 17 minutes. So we're going to hit the highlights today and kind of share some of the fun things. Now, the first part of the project was a discovery phase. We spent probably 2 to 3 months working with staff. We met with some of the external groups as well. But one of the things that we did first was an online questionnaire. What we wanted to do before we ever talk to anyone is get kind of a lay of the land. So everything we talk about here, this actually manifests itself as what we call a voice of the customer. Where were we today? What kind of mapping, what kind of GIS was being used? How was that relating to your other IT investments? And so this was probably a 75-page document, really documenting that voice of the customer. And that's important that we understand who our customers are and how they feel about the technology. We had 43 people respond internally and give us a good idea of where we were as far as the technology was concerned. So I'm not going to go through all the nuts and bolts of that, but I wanted you to know that we started before we talked to anyone with this whole voice of the customer concept. The next major phase of this was to actually do interviews with key staff, with key departments, talk about how are they using the technology today, what IT systems they have in place, what data challenges they may have, how they're interfacing with the public, and really what are the things that are most important to them within their department and how this technology can support that. So we talked about that. And again, a whole other chapter identifying the needs and weaknesses and strengths and that kind of thing. Now, with that said, some of the major findings that we're going to see in our needs assessment will boil down to this slide. And as we want to advance the technology, we have to wrestle with the governance. Is our governance today at the town of Ajax optimal to get the highest impact from the investment in GIS, the investment in our IT systems? How about data and databases? This is a big part of it. Is our data where it needs to be? We identified over 50 data-related action items that the department said, hey, we need this data, or we need to augment this data, or we need to perfect this data. Another big thing that we talk about is the integration with your IT systems. Think about all of the years of investing in IT systems and the data that lives in your Amanda system and CityWorks and all of these systems that undergird the town. We want to be able to leverage that information and visualize it all in this one platform. So you can see on this slide, we identified over 50 application needs, over 50 data needs. The IT infrastructure is in a good place, not too much there. A lot of times we have to wrestle with that, but we're in a good place there. And then, of course, training and education, over 30 recommendations there. So it's a holistic look at the technology, and we'll get into a little bit more of some of the specificity behind it. Kind of where the rubber meets the road, and the exciting part that we wanted to share with you today are the end user applications. You know, you can appreciate that all the IT things have to go on behind the scenes, you know, how we're going to share this data publicly or internally, and making sure we do that responsibly, and, you know, can we use the data in the field. But what we found as we were interviewing the departments is that there's a commonality. Everybody wants to use GIS as a, for lack of a better word, a common operational picture, a way to view everything that they do and key elements. So we can see some things that were identified, and this is certainly a subset of everything, but there's the ability to see the town in 3 dimensions, the ability to interface with our Amanda system, to map out volunteers, to do vulnerability assessments. And part of this is the new software, the software that you guys already own, is really identifying how can we leverage that optimally. So things like GIS Enabled Dashboards and internal viewers. And I'm going to let James show you some of this. It's like what we like to say is a map is worth 1,000 records. So James is going to show some examples of how this internal experience is going to evolve at the town. So James, if you would.
Great, thanks, Kurt. Yes, so, you know, GIS has really matured over the years to give us the ability to really do some exciting things for various departments. Now, one of those new initiatives in GIS is deploying what we refer to as a hub site. So think of this as your GIS library. There's various tools and applications that can be embedded into the hub site that drives specific information to various departmental users. And that can really take on a life of its own on really what tools do we want to deploy, what data do we want to envision, and how do we want to do that. So the hub site's a really nice starting point to accomplish those types of initiatives. Now, Kurt had mentioned leveraging IT infrastructure and IT data into GIS. Traditionally, that's something that is separate, but now what we can do is really merge the two together. So you envision all the different systems that you have in IT, whether it be your Amanda database and other databases as well, for like permits. So in this instance, this is a dashboard view. And this is software that the town already owns. Gives us the ability to dynamically view information for, in this case, permits. So now I know how many active permits I might have in a general region. I have their various charts, and these are all interactive. So if I'm interested in all the residential addition permits, I can filter that section of the chart. And it will now tell me there's 35 active permits that are residential additions. I can go to a particular location, zoom into it, and get additional information that way. So really within a handful of clicks, I can then start using and asking and answering different questions that make sense for me as a user in various departments. Another example would be maybe I want to look at capital projects in a GIS interface. In this case, I've got a total project cost of all of my projects in a GIS tool set. But I also have various categories. Maybe I want to filter by type or phase of the project. Maybe the category. If I'm interested in all the building projects, I can come in here, filter that. And if you notice, when I do that, the active project list now changes and the total cost also changes. If I'm interested in a particular one, maybe I want to go and see more information about the City Hall exterior refurbishment project, highlight that section, and again, it will filter me down to all the total costs and additional information that I might want to tie to that particular project there. So all very easily done, merging those two systems together in GIS to really make sense of how GIS can benefit each department. Now, Kurt had mentioned 3-dimensionality of GIS. This is really exciting because traditionally GIS is in a 2-dimensional world. Well, in the last few years, what we have the ability to do is really model the world that we live in this case, the town of Ajax, in a 3-dimensional set. So I can zoom in, I can pan, I can look at various features such as trees. Here's a specific tree here. I can navigate around. Maybe I want to do some modeling for how the area looks during certain times of day with a shading type tool set. Or if I'm building a new building over here and maybe this parcel, I might want to model that new building and see what it looks like before it's actually constructed. So very easily done now with 3D GIS, along with maybe I want to look at a downtown region with storefronts. I can visualize the actual photograph on top of GIS for different storefronts in an area. So This is where GIS is going in the three-dimensional world. And these are just a couple of different examples of how internal applications can be used for the town of Ajax.
Yeah, thanks, James. So that's exactly right. Those are internal. And again, literally, we could spend hours showing you some of the cool things that are out there. But so another component, and it ties back to the town's goals as well, is engaging our public, our stakeholders. And every department had a list of opportunities and things that they may want to share with the public. So not only sharing information, but getting feedback from the public as well. So as you can see, as we go through the next few slides, there's a variety of things such as different viewers or an energy use audit or economic development, what we call story maps, telling the town of the story of the town, mapping out our playgrounds and camps and tying that back to our reservation system, special event story map, public art walking tour. You've already got one up that we'll mention in a second called the Spirit Walk story map. Some of you may have seen that. And so there's just, every department had a list of, it'd be great if we could share this. And not only is it that we're sharing it, but it's just a great way to, what we often find on return on investment is that if I can make some things self-serve, then it's 24/7, but also I'm potentially reducing some of the burden on the staff by providing this. So let's look at some of those new tools on the public side. James, show us a few of those if you would.
You bet. Thanks. So yeah, this is where we really find out how successful we are with GIS is when we start interacting with the residents and providing tools that make sense for them to ask and answer questions on their own. This is Mississauga, and this is an economic development story map. The first tab really just kind of highlights what they're doing as a city. And then there's tabs across the top here that allow me to really dive into all different types of aspects of economic development. Maybe I want to look at business growth and see certain information in various tabs that makes sense for me as a business owner, right? So I can scroll in here, I get a GIS map, I get a directory link down here at the bottom. Maybe I'm interested in all the different industries that are available in Mississauga, and maybe I want to dive into the aerospace section. I can just very quickly, again, dive into GIS and tools and applications and data that makes sense in this case, an economic development scenario. So a lot of neat ways of deploying a story map. Here's another example. This is more driven towards planning projects for the public to consume. If I'm interested in a downtown mixed use project, I can highlight that thumbnail. It will take me over to it and it will give me information about that particular project. I can put in verbiage in here. Maybe there's some text and information we want to provide to the residents as well. That's also available. Architectural drawings, you kind of get the idea of all the different multimedia type data that can be tied to a GIS interface, in this case for planning projects. Now this one's an interesting one. This is a story map that really, a lot of our organizations want to take a plan of some sort, whether it be a master plan, park master plan, in this case, a sidewalk master plan, and put GIS against it. So it really turns it into a living document that allows us to embed not only the overall information about that plan, but also GIS can help support that plan. So in this case, I've got an interactive map for all of the different information through the collection of sidewalk information in a GIS/plan story map. Very easily to do there. Another nice tool within integrating and engaging with residents is a citizen engagement tool set. I'm new to the area and I want to identify what the town offers in this case for recycling days and trash pickup days, but it could be anything. It could be where the nearest library is or where the nearest park is to my location. I can turn on information for parking in this case, or maybe when the streets are going to be swept. And a nice way of really leveraging the technology that's available, it also gives us the ability to have a two-way communication with the residents. So if I'm an individual and I need to report an issue, maybe there's a challenge in my neighborhood, I could report an issue and bring up another interface to communicate back to the town to say, hey, there's an issue in my neighborhood, and then you'll have that in a queue to take action as needed. So a nice way of just interacting right there with residents. Now, this one I think will really kind of hit home for today's presentation is really promoting what you're doing as a city council. So in this case, there's a welcome message here from the mayor. I can scroll through the list. I get a map of all the different districts that are in this area. Here's our mayor right here. I've got some contact information. I've got some term information, the biography of the individual. And then I can scroll down and I can start getting information about each district, right? So here's council member Teresa Kang, and then the map will highlight what that district is. So now I know if I live in this area, this is my council member. So a nice way of leveraging GIS for them as well. Now, public safety in GIS really kind of hits home. And in this case, this is Brampton. And they really wanted to help promote what the fire group is doing for alleviating challenges that they might have as a fire department or a fire group. So some of the information here, this is like a PSA, kind of engaging the residents with certain challenges in certain areas to help them alleviate those types of problems. Now, the last couple applications I want to show is really leveraging the historical aspect of the organization. So this is a downtown walking tour. It's got some information here on how to navigate the tour. It gives me a map of the different stops along the tour. There's some multimedia embedded in here, maybe an audio file of a particular building, some historical documents and so forth, the now and then type concept. Now, to take that a little step further, what we can also leverage is looking at the now and then type concept. So this is the Cunningham family homestead. It was actually built in 1849, but this is what it looks like today. Now, by archiving historical photographs, what we can do is really kind of step back in time. We can do what's called a swipe map technology. So I can see what the photograph looked like in 1849 with these two ladies in front of their fence and the now and then type concept. So that can really take on a whole life of its own as well on how we can use GIS for historical preservation and historical information as well.
So thanks, James. And what we wanted to do is just show you the diversity of the tool set. As you can imagine on those previous slides, there's all kinds of things, and nothing did we show you is it's all about what you want to see. As James mentioned on that My Neighborhood Services, you may have 10 different things that you guys want to share with the public, and it's different than Brampton next door to you. So now, as we wrap a bow on this next 5 minutes, kind of wrapping up some of the things that we looked at, is first, as Nicole pointed out, is that you guys are already successful. It's not like we're starting from nothing. You have a history of success. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to stop there and have a group hug, and that's great. We need to actually think about what we can do to get to the next level. So we talk about some of your current successes. You're probably familiar with Ajax on the map, and we looked at some of the things you currently have in the return on investment of those things. Are you saving some steps in your processes? Are you saving time? Are you saving money? We have a whole chapter dedicated to this. So if you want some leisurely reading, you can look at that. But things like a tree inventory, public-facing applications, horticulture, staff enablement with a map viewer, public engagement maps. You have your spirit walk. You see the bottom right-hand graphic. So there's all kinds of things you're already doing successfully, which is great. Now, one of the things that we did, because we do a lot of this, is we said, what are the best practices around Canada, around North America? We've done a lot of work in the Ontario area. I was looking at, we've done strategic plans for Peterborough, Mississauga, Guelph, Oshawa, Brant County, Caledon, the list goes on and on. So the thing is, we can kind of look at what are some of the best practices. What are those things that you need to have in place to be successful? And we kind of couch that in these 6 categories: governance, data and databases, procedures, workflow and integration, software, infrastructure. And as we benchmark, it allows us to set key performance indicators. And we can see an example of this on the next 2 slides. This is something that in another chapter that your team can build towards, to say for GIS governance, what are the best practices that are going to move us from where we are today to where we want to be into the smart city kind of realm? And this is, I'm not going to say, James, you can go back to that real quick. I'm not going to go through each of these, but yeah, go ahead into that slide. Not going to go through each of these, but there's a section for, what is our game plan? So what are those common practices? And over the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see this fill in towards, more of 100%. And I will say, as we've done this, you scored higher than most towns and cities that we work with. So you've made a lot of good progress, but there's still things that we can do, which is important to note. So on the next slide, we like to look at this as well. The 6 logical stages of GIS maturity. And actually, my business partner published a book on GIS strategic planning in towns and cities. And this was taken from his book, but as far as the concept. But what we're looking at is, when we look at this continuum, if you're on the left-hand side, you're just getting into GIS. You're just adopting the technology. But now for you guys, you've already moved through enhancing the usage to some efficiencies, and now you're in more of a strategic position in that fourth component where we're doing things well. We have a governance team. We're rolling out GIS, and what we want to do over the next 4 or 5 years is to move to what we call operational excellence and a smart city type concept, to where GIS is kind of embedded in that and driving that. So we cover that in the document. Again, you're in a good place in that regard. So the second phase of the project, and we're getting close to the end of the presentation here for today, was to look at, we got all of these discovery things that we found out and all these needs. That's great. How do we get from there to here? And part of that is the system design. And one of the things we look at is governance. So we look at your existing governance today. Your GIS team, superstars, they're in the business solutions, the group of technology and innovation, somewhat hidden away, tucked away, to where not really, very visible to the organization. And we think, the team's doing great, but I think there's an opportunity as we look at that current team. They're totally at capacity, but they've also got 100 new potential items that have been identified. So what we've done on the governance component in that second phase is look at what do we need to do to reorganize and get to the next step. One of the things that we see as a standard throughout Ontario, Canada, and really throughout North America is having that dedicated lead GIS position. So we're recommending we create that lead GIS position, often called a GIS supervisor. That kind of helps us take it to the next level. We definitely believe you should maintain your current 3 staffing positions. And over the next few years, if you're going to achieve the 100 plus needs, we need more resourcing. We need some analysts internally, or we need to engage with contractors to assist, or a combination of both. But that's a primary key to success, because the staff has got a lot of things going on. If we're going to grow, we need to do that responsibly. And so we recommended this kind of future direction of the GIS team is that you have a geographic information solutions division within the technology and innovation team, a GIS supervisor, and then the staff people in the darker blue. Some of those are going to be more of a corporate focus. Others are going to be maybe a specialist on with the bigger departments and operations and environmental services and planning. And then, so the team can work together, but also we have experts in some of those disciplines as well. So that's kind of the model that we were looking at. Another big thing that we have to remember is you're not an island unto yourself. You're in the region of Durham, you're in the province, you're in the country. So when it comes to GIS, everybody's doing it. And we need to make sure we continue to leverage that. And you're doing a good job, as we see at the top right-hand side, of currently partnering and sharing resources, sharing data, things as appropriate. But we need to continue that as well. So we look at how can we enhance our regionality, because things don't stop at the border. If we're looking at affordable housing, that doesn't stop right at the border, those kind of things. We need to look at things in that regional context, as well as the specificity of the town. And then the last phase of the project, we get into things like the return on investment we talked about earlier, but I like this part of it, because we looked at your corporate goals in your corporate strategic plan. Excuse me, I'm battling some sinuses here. So on the corporate strategic plan, we looked at, hey, what is it that you say is important town-wide? And when I say you, I mean town council, and then your economic development plan. And we think it's important that we align GIS, and we talk about how GIS can be aligned to achieve those goals. So I suspect you're going to have some new goals as well. So James, talk to this slide, and we'll go back and forth through these next 2 slides.
Yeah, so leveraging GIS, to align with those council goals and town goals are really important, right? So connecting with the community, how can we do that with GIS? We can leverage the hub site that I showed at the very beginning to provide a solution for the residents. We can look at arts and tourism opportunities. We can bring in history and heritage type applications, as I showed a little while ago. Fire safety is another one that very well could lend itself to that initiative to align the goals.
So when I look at the investing in our community component, if I'm on town council, I'm thinking if I'm going to achieve the things that I say I want to achieve, for the most part, a lot of these are geographic issues. So I want to look at downtown Ajax. I want to do some three-dimensionality. I want to share a walking tour. I want to promote my downtown. My stormwater sustainability plan. I can't do that without GIS. as an elected official, I've got, if I was on town council, I'd say, yeah, that makes sense. These things we need to align, which is important that we do that. We're not doing GIS for GIS sake. We're doing it to align. So looking at the snowplow routes and park asset inventories at the bottom right is looking at our park infrastructure and sharing, that parks master plan. And then we look at and leading our community. James, a couple of comments on that.
Yeah, you bet. So, leveraging that whole concept of providing your seniors with asset information on how they can get to various locations, maybe some routing optimization. GIS lends itself to that. We want to engage and collect data in the field through GPS data collection and really continue to be a trailblazer in the industry, right? So leveraging the technology that's available and making sense of it in a appropriate manner for all different users. Everybody's going to use GIS. It's whether internal or public facing, everybody can use it. Whether they realize they're using it or not, that's when we know we're successful. When they go to a website and they leverage GIS that the town has provided to provide the solutions that the town goals lend themselves to.
So that whole discussion is in the final chapter of the document, that alignment with your goals. And then the last bit we're going to talk about is the implementation timeline. Another chapter that talks about what we're going to do when. But as we look at this slide, what we're recommending in general is that you continue to build your foundations in year one. We look at that staff resourcing. You saw the 50 plus data creation items, some things we need to do to enhance what we currently have. Moving more into the enablement, this is somewhat of a generalization because there's crossover every year, as you can appreciate. But we want to do some enablement with those portals and dashboards and analytics. Year three, a lot more. We should be getting very established on the public-facing application. And then moving into enhancing. And then really our goal is that whole smart city. How can we make GIS part of that system of systems, and GIS being that common operational picture for residents, for staff to make decisions. And so therefore we have just presented 300 pages of documents and hit the highlights, and it's exciting technology, and hats off again for working with the team, the senior management team. It's been a pleasure, a lot of good vision. There's some good things going on at the town. So I just hate it had to hit during COVID because I like going to the towns and getting to know them a little bit. So my exposure has been all remote, but hopefully things will lift and we'll be able to come up and see you guys. So great job, great team that you have there, and thank you very much. If anybody has any questions or thoughts, please feel free.
Thank you very much. A very thorough presentation, and it was nice samples too. Does anyone have any questions or comments right now regarding the presentation? None? Okay, you did such a good job explaining.
Right.
Thank you so much. So there is a report as part of this item that was brought forward in 6.1 with a couple of recommendations. So are there any questions regarding the report? Okay, seeing none, could I please have a mover to move the report? I see Regional Councillor Dyes. All in favor? Okay, it carries, none opposed. Thank you very much for your time in the presentation.
All right, take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
So we'll move to presentation 6.2, which is the library space needs assessment. I see we have the Clio, Sarah Basler, and the presenter. So I'll just pass it on to you, Sarah. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Bauer. Good afternoon. Today I'm joined by Monteith Brown Planning Consultants. Todd Brown and Ananda Sai will be presenting the high-level findings from our library space needs assessment. The library conducted this study because anecdotally, we knew that we were feeling space constraints. And we know that as the town continues to grow and change due to changes in existing infrastructure and intensification, that this feeling would be exacerbated over time. And so this study attempts to answer if council decides to continue to invest in libraries and maintain and hopefully improve service levels in Ajax, If, when, and how will we do that? How will we improve our current footprint? So without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Todd Brown.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And it's a pleasure to be with you today. Anand Desai from our firm is also with me. And once I'm through the presentation, we'll be happy to both answer any questions that anyone has. The Library Space Needs Assessment has been presented to the Library Board. And it was important also that it be presented to yourselves as well. We'll go to the next slide. So the purpose of the needs assessment is really to guide how the town of Ajax and the Ajax Library will invest in existing and future infrastructure associated with branches. And we're really looking at about a 10-year time frame, recognizing that some of the recommendations that we have are tied to other projects. So the timing could be slightly adjusted over that period. Next slide. In terms of timing for the project itself, we started in August of last year, really conducting a lot of background research, community consultation, and staff consultation as well. We met with counselors during that process in addition. That resulted in an insights report, which was really a background report that would support or provide us with the knowledge of what we needed in the town in order to meet the needs of the community. And then went to SMT, senior management team at the town for their feedback, library board, and now to yourselves. The next slide. So just, there's a lot of trends associated with libraries. So I just wanted to hit on a couple of key areas. Certainly your population continues to grow, and we had to around 132,000 people at present, growing to about 137,650. Over the next 10 years, so about 5,600 more people. There's certainly a shift in how you're growing. We're seeing a lot more in higher density development, both residentially and employment-wise, in established areas. So that is going to put pressure on your existing branches and potentially future locations. We see libraries really as community hubs. They're a place for learning, for economic development. They're creative spaces, and they're places for people to gather. The libraries are also seen as third places or safe spaces for people to go. And when we talk about third spaces, often it's the first space is the home. Second place is work or school. And the third place is somewhere in the community where people feel comfortable and like to be. And libraries are playing a key role in that. Libraries are also being designed to manage the diverse needs and interests of the population, which has changed over time. We're seeing demands for maker spaces and more creative and collaborative spaces within libraries, and opportunities to keep people engaged. So it's not just about books, although books are still a critical component. And libraries are also seen as a potential way out of the pandemic. They played a key role many years ago through when we had a downturn in the economy. And we see that libraries can play a role in that, as well as was mentioned earlier in your agenda. Next slide. So the assessment has come back with 3 provision models for the library. The main branch being a branch that serves the entire community. It serves as a central hub of community activity. It's a resource center with expanded collections and specialized services for all of the public. And usually a minimum size of 33,000 square feet is recommended. A district branch is a smaller branch serving about a 2-kilometer radius, and generally about 15,000 square feet as a minimum, and providing a broad collection of program services and collections to the public. And then the last area is the neighborhood branch, which serves about a 1.5 kilometer radius, about 10,000 square feet or larger. It really fills the gaps between the main branch and the district branch and provides a little bit less level of service or a smaller range of services and programs, largely due to its size. Next slide. So we looked at library space and standards that are applied really across the province and beyond. And ultimately, the amount of space that any community requires is really dependent upon the unique needs of that community. So that was why it was so important for us to get out there and talk to your public, talk to your stakeholders, talk to your staff and yourselves to get a good understanding of how the library is used today and how people are looking to use it in the future. We also look at provincial guidelines that are prepared by a number of organizations that traditionally target about 0.6 square feet per capita, which, as council would know, is also embedded in your official plan, specifically targeting that 0.6 square feet per capita for library space. When we look across the Greater Toronto area, we see ranges anywhere from 0.5 square feet to 1 square foot per capita. So there is quite a range out there that is being provided. We also note that for yourselves, you have added one new library in the last 18 years, being the Audley branch, so relatively new. Because it did effectively replace the village branch, you still have 3 service points. So that has not changed in terms of a number of access points to the library services within the community. The next slide, please. We also did a lot of benchmarking, looking at communities across the province and then more locally, and concentrating more on the South Durham region, the more comparable to yourselves. Only the Whitby Public Library serves more people on average than the Ajax Library. So you serve a lot of people. And although you provide the 3rd highest gross floor area in that benchmark comparison, you also offer the lowest amount of library space per capita. So it's a fair amount of space, but you have a lot of population. So when we look at it on an individual basis, you are on the bottom end of that. So that is a takeaway. Next slide. So we also wanted to look at comparisons of other library systems that have populations generally in the range that you are, and the available information took us to 100,000 to 250,000 populations. And we found that really you have half the number of service points as the average of those communities. So 3 compared to 6 that we see in other communities, 30% less library space than the average 80,000 square feet that we see in these other communities. Service level that is 20% below the average of 0.52 square feet per capita. You're around 0.43. And ranking second last in terms of library space per capita, really only the city of Barrie is lower than yourselves. So again, another takeaway as we move forward. The next slide. So we also want to look at distribution, and library staff were very helpful in identifying all the locations of their card holders, and we're able to map where they're located and how they relate to each of the 3 branches. And what we found is there's a concentration of library services in central Ajax, really the collection of downtown, midtown, and uptown, as well as in the northeast. There are no library branches located south of Bailey or west of Westney Road. We see a notable gap, particularly along the residential areas in the waterfront area and within or near the Pickering Village area and north of Roslyn Road and Westney Road area. However, there is strong strong access by public vehicles or private vehicles, to many of these locations. But really, the only branch, being the main branch, has public transit access. So you'll see later on that we do have a recommendation regarding improving access to those locations. The next slide. So in terms of future space, really it's a matter of the town of Ajax and the Ajax Library working together to define a collective vision for how library branches should contribute to the broader community building initiatives. So looking at things like placemaking, community vibrancy, urban regeneration, economic development, and support of creative industry. We're recommending that you continue to try to apply that 0.6 square feet that is in your official plan, not just because it's in the plan, but because the research and analysis has supported and justified that much space really is needed in order to provide a modern library experience for your residents. Next slide, please. So in terms of the branch development strategy, we're recommending that you undertake an architectural exercise to evaluate the opportunities to expand the main branch by about 10 to 15,000 square feet. At a high level, we see an opportunity really between the library itself and the town hall, and perhaps an opportunity to connect the two. But that would have to be really vetted out through an architectural process. There is an opportunity to address growth-related initiatives advanced in your Central Ajax intensification, servicing, and transportation strategy. So we have tried to tie into some of the other initiatives that you are moving forward on. Service in the Midwest, adding about 10 to 15,000 square feet in the vicinity of and west of Kingston Road and Weston Road intensification corridors. And we really see this happening in two ways. One being an expansion to the main, the McLean branch. Again, with this, an architectural exercise will be necessary in order to make sure that there is sufficient land to expand the location. And we're looking at about 4,400 additional square feet in that location. And then secondly, we know there's been a lot of talk about the Pickering Village area and redevelopment of that site. And we think that the library should be part of that development and looking at approximately 10,000 square feet for that as part of that multi-use, multi-functional building. If any of those turns out not to be possible as a result of those architectural exercises, then we'd be looking at trying to identify 10,000 additional square feet, either as a standalone facility or elsewhere, ideally in the Pickering Village area or in Southeast Ajax. And next slide. Just to summarize, in terms of our recommendations, ongoing recommendations over the course of the plan is really adopting that centralized branch model consisting of main branch, district branch, and neighborhood branches to guide space planning, targeting that 0.6 square feet per capita, resulting in a need for about a total of 82,000 square feet of library space, including your existing space by 2031, and which would involve constructing about 27,000 additional square feet of library branch within your community over the next 10 years. Next slide. In terms of immediate recommendations in 2022, engaging with the town, so really the library engaging with the town to determine the possibility or the feasibility of being part of the Pickering Village redevelopment site, and working with the Durham Region Transit to extend transit service to both the McLean branch and Audley branch to have bus stops at or near the entrance to the community center and library. We know that this is it is a barrier to people participating and getting to those locations. In the short term, 2023 to 2024, examining the feasibility of expanding the McLean branch, and if deemed feasible, going forward with construction at that time, and examining the feasibility of expanding the main branch, that 10 to 15,000 square feet. In the medium term, constructing a branch at the Pickering Village, and again, that would really tie into the town's timeframe for any redevelopment of that site. So it may not be within the 20 to 25 to 20 to 27 timeframe, but it's indicative of sort of the pressures on the library and the timing for it. And then lastly, long term, should it prove out that the main branch could be expanded in 2028 to 2031, expanding that branch if possible. So with that, we want to keep our presentation relatively short so that we have time for any questions, and we're pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you for the presentation. Do any members of council have questions? I see Regional Councillor Dyes. Go ahead, please.
Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Todd. It was interesting, and I agree with you that the village is a real opportunity to expand some space for the library. It's meant to be intensified with residential, and it's going to be a mix. And I wondered if, looking at that space, if we've always sort of earmarked it as the cultural hub of the community as well, and that fits in very nice with the library. The Rotary Room at the main building is a wonderful space that can morph into different things. And so we have a cultural community with the arts where they like to do different art shows, as does the library. And also, I'm hoping that that space will incorporate teaching space, which is something we talked about a long time ago on that land. So it's really could be a really interactive space. And I wonder if that's something the library would consider.
Well, I know in our discussions, and I don't want to speak for Sarah, she may want to add to this, but from our perspective, we could really see a lot of opportunity for business support, for the creative industries, for arts and culture, and for feeding into what the town's recreation planning is trying to do as well with seniors and youth in that location in addition. So there's a lot of collaborative opportunities, a lot of partnership opportunities to work with others and really have the library be part of that. Makerspace is one element of sort of looking into the future of what the library could do. But we do see that there is opportunity both at the existing locations as well as this future Pickering Village redevelopment.
Through the chair, if I may add to Regional Councillor Dyes, in addition, this idea of incorporating culture more in library spaces really marries well with the ongoing project of transferring the archives collection to the library. So certainly in a redeveloped library space such as the Pickering Village Community Center, we could dedicate a beautiful space to showcasing our community culture, heritage, and archival collections.
Well, that's a great idea. Thank you. And that really builds a sense of community for new residents here in Ajax. My other question would be opportunities with respect to intensification on the major road like Kingston Road, for example. So with high-rise intensification, there's that opportunity commercial retail at the street level, but those are often hard to fill, those vacancies. And I see that as an opportunity for the library. It may not be traditional, but something that you might be utilized to entice the community to get involved and then visit your other locations. How would you feel about that opportunity? I don't know if there's anybody doing it out there yet, because we're just starting with intensification.
Yes, there's great research out there, and there are others doing it. And Anand Desai from our firm has done a lot of research on this particular topic. So maybe I'll have him answer that if Anand's comfortable.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, to the regional councillor. I think it sounds kind of what you're describing as that kind of retail library concept, almost a storefront type of model. And so, whether it's your traditional library branch or something scaled back to kind of reflect the land scarcity and the land cost in these areas of intensification, certain library systems like the city of Vaughan, for example, in a mixed use development will have a traditional branch, but kind of a much smaller storefront model as well, where it's a few hundred square feet. It could be dedicated to more holds lockers or things like that. But the gist of it is to really allow the town and the library to expand its outreach in areas where population is increasing, vertically or just through other higher forms of density. So certainly our branch provision model and the research in this library plan supports physical buildings, but it also encourages the library to explore alternative ways to deliver its services to your community.
And that's really important. So there's also perhaps an opportunity at the GO station, which is going to be a transit hub, and it will be intensified as well. And that could take on a totally different form because people are moving quickly. It's something maybe they're downloading, who knows? But I think there is a connection there as well. I'm not, again, don't know if others are doing that, but I think it's something we could look at. So go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, through the chair to Councillor Dyes. Yes, exactly. I think that being open-minded on opportunities, and certainly the GO transit location bears looking at, and it could be simply Holtz Locker, where people can pick up a book that they've pre-ordered, to a number of different things, an internet access point, there's a lot of different ideas out there. So as those kind of developments come forward and ideas come forward, the library should always be looking at, and the town looking at, how can we be part of this development if we have a need for it, and keeping that open mind.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the information. I can remember talking about, the library should be a hub for our community, and you stepped up to the plate big time. It is the hub of the community, and usership is going up, not down, which surprises a lot of people. But there are so many various programs that you put out there for everybody that it's very, very popular. So looking forward to a future where we can see something different and, be proactive about how we use our space. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of council? None? Okay. Thank you. I just had a couple. Actually, probably just one. So you made the comment that the Audley Rec and the McLean Center are not on the bus line currently. Is that right?
If I might, would you like me to go ahead, Sarah? Or
go ahead, Anand.
Yeah. So through you, Madam Chair, it's more or less. I mean, they're near bus stops. But what we heard through the public was Audley, for example, the bus stop is across the street, or a fair distance away, and especially as traffic increases along those kind of arterial roads, if one's pushing a stroller across the street, that becomes more of a challenge, where you get off the bus and walk the distance to the library branch. And so as much as they're proximal to bus stops, they're not necessarily close or at the library. So, and the exception, what we heard was the main branch was the only one. Even if we look at McLean, and it's embedded within the neighborhood to an extent, one's getting off the bus, the main bus route, a block or two away. So that's kind of what we heard, and the rationale for us to make the recommendation to work with your partners at Durham Transit to see if there's a way to move bus stops closer to the library. I hope that covers anything, Sarah, that you were planning to speak to, or if you needed to add there.
Yeah, to the chair, anticipating that this question might come up, I actually did a DRT bus map to see where the nearest stop was for Audley. And it is up on Taunton Road, and it is approximately a 10-minute walk from the stop to the rec center. And so while 10 minutes on a beautiful day like today is very easy to do and people enjoy it, if there's someone with mobility issues or the weather is foul, that does provide a barrier to accessing not only library services, but the rec center as well.
100%, absolutely. Or if you have young ones in tow, 10 minutes can feel like 2 hours, right? So, okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I think the map that you had presenting all the library card holders, that looks like something that GIS took care of or could handle. I just wanted to point that out. And yeah, I think the report is very interesting. It's really good information to know what we need to be prepared for, what we need to plan for. And as staff love to use, or we all like to use, the made in Ajax solution. So I'm sure having this information and seeing the recommendations, we're going to come up with something. So are there any other questions from any other member of council? And seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 7 is moving into the closed session. So could I please have a mover to move us into closed session? I see Councillor Khan. All in favor? Okay, and we'll move. Thank you. We are now back in open session, Madam Chair. Thank you. So I guess the next thing we need to do is adjourn the meeting then. May I please have a mover to adjourn today's meeting? I see Regional Councillor Crawford. All in favor? Thank you. That carries. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good job, Madam Chair.
Great job, Madam Chair.
Great job, Chair.
Chair.
Gender too.
/ she.